I'll just very briefly introduce myself so you know who's talking to you. I'm a real-life licensed attorney in Quebec. I've been practicing for over 5 years. My name is Jamie Benizri, and I founded a firm called Legal Logic about 4 years ago. And the idea behind Legal Logic was to match the needs of startups and entrepreneurs, the people who I'm speaking to today, with real-life legal solutions. On time, without any nonsense, knowing what basically getting everything you need to start and grow your business. So, what am I doing here? This is a very almost unnatural platform for a lot of lawyers. And the reason I'm here is because I'm not like every natural lawyer. I have a very strong backbone in entrepreneurship. I've created companies, I've sold companies, I've failed in business, I've succeeded in business. So I know the agony, the excitement, and all the other good stuff that goes along with doing what you guys are doing. I get excited when I hear about projects, brand new technology that are not mainstream. I get excited when I see people collaborating in this platform. So I want to protect people like this, and I want to protect people who are part of this community, the WearHacks community. That's a little bit about me. As a lawyer, I litigate, I coach entrepreneurs, I advise in funding, and I do other things that are kind of not only business, but business plus. So the presentation today will be focused on incorporations, starting protecting a business, and how I can give you tips, even without calling me after this interview or this speech, how you can go about protecting and why. I want to instill reflexes in you guys today, so when you leave, you know when to call me or any other lawyer. I also want to give you reflexes about trademarks. People overlook trademarks, and it's important that you know what's happening today in the industry. In 2016, trademarks will be changing. The trademark industry will be changing. It's going to be more expensive, more complicated for you to protect your trademarks. I want to make sure that you have certain reflexes today to go ahead and register your trademarks in Canada. And I'll also tell you how to go to the US and how to go to Europe and all kinds of other Madrid conventions to protect your stuff internationally. And I also want to talk to you a little bit about trademark application. So because we're in Quebec and because there are two very specific languages, I'm going to tell you guys the application of trademarks in Canada and how they apply to Quebec. So how companies like Second Cup and Best Buy, how come the Office de la Langue Française is not knocking on their door, and what these big players have done to fight back. And I also want to tell you guys a little bit about funding. Everyone in here will need funding. Everybody wants funding. If it's not today, it'll be tomorrow. I'm going to try to tell you guys a little bit about the non-traditional means. So forget the VCs, forget everybody else. What can we do today on an immediate basis to get those, to get funds in our pocket? Things like crowdfunding and other things like that. In Quebec, in Canada, there are several ways that you can operate your business. The most obvious, straightforward way is to have a sole proprietorship. The government's role, the business registrar's role, is to make sure that the public knows who they're doing business with. They want to make sure that Jamie Benizri, who operates his law firm under Legal Logic, people know who's behind Legal Logic so that there's a certain level of protection. So the government says, you know what? We don't need you to spend all this money on incorporation. If you want, you can register your personal name and just declare a doing business as. A raison sociale, like we call it in Quebec. So for about $35, you get your NEQ, you're registered with the government, and you can have secondary names under which you're doing business. This creates absolutely no distinction between you personally and your business activities. It doesn't matter if you have 2 bank accounts. It doesn't matter if you work from home or you have a lease with your personal name. If your business gets into trouble, you will get into trouble, and vice versa. There is no protecting any assets, and there's absolutely no protection. So just because of that, your lawyer, the guy who's standing in front of you, is not so concerned about all the additional cash that you have in your bank account and how it's treated fiscally or from a tax perspective. Your lawyer is concerned, justifiably, because society is getting very messy, It's concerned about protecting your business and separating that from your personal assets. Your home, your Honda Civic, your wife's assets, the ring you just bought your wife or your girlfriend, whatever it is, I want to make sure that that's protected. So in case it doesn't work out exactly as planned, we can continue, we can live on. And our home is going to be unaffected, and a bailiff is not going to come and seize our 50-inch Sony TV that we just put up on the wall. So how do we go about doing that? In Quebec, Canada, there's two ways we can incorporate a company. We can do it provincially. We can do it federally. Now, this is one of the baseline questions people ask me. They come to me, they say, okay, we want to incorporate, what do we do? So I need to know if it's going to be federal or Quebec. Now, if you are operating exclusively in Quebec, if you don't have any immediate plans of shifting offices, moving to Vancouver, Calgary, whatever the case may be, for $250 less, we can get you a Quebec charter to legally operate a separate entity, a corporation in Montreal, in Quebec. So what I do is I go through a very short list of questions, and just to give you the reflexes as to who's behind a corporation, who runs the day-to-day operations of a corporation. It's the board of directors. There's a board of directors who's put in place. The company is owned by shareholders in the proportion and the categories that they have. And the lawyer is the guy who puts together the description. How many shares? Who votes? If you vote, under what conditions? Does anyone have super votes? Do I want someone to have a specific dividend? Who gets paid first? So if you plan on issuing or taking $100,000 from your uncle, but you know that your uncle has a history of alcohol abuse and moves consistently and gets married and often gets into trouble, well, I want to make sure that drunk uncle only gets a very specific category of shares and is not going to start coming to meetings of shareholders and voting in a specific way. So that's where it's important, because anybody can go online and for the government fees, register your corporation. You can do it instantaneously, and you can all do it. You don't need me to do it. What you need me for is to understand what kind of shares you need, who's behind the corporation, and who does what. Because my best clients come from the people who just do it at 1 a.m. After a couple drinks, and they don't know what they got themselves involved with. Because when it comes time around for your investment round, new shareholders, an acquisition, that's when you realize that things were not done properly, and it's going to cost you a lot of time, but more importantly, the delays associated with that can affect whether or not that person continues with you. So if your stuff is not in order, that can be problematic. So the ins and outs of incorporation, and we can go to the next slide right away. I just want to give you a scenario that's going to stick with you. What happens when we want to start a company, we want to start a business, and we immediately start having dealings with suppliers. We want to have a lease. We want to start signing all kinds of agreements. Now, if you don't have a corporation, Jamie will use me as Jamie Ben Isri. If I'm going out and signing Jamie Ben Isri here, Jamie Ben Isri there with my lease, with my suppliers, with my contractors, what happens if Jamie Ben Isri cannot pay his expenses? What happens if I get sick and I can't operate my business anymore? Those contractors and suppliers will come after me because I'm in a contract and people expect you, for some reason, to abide by the contract. So they will come after you. You can expect a lawsuit from your landlord. You can expect a lawsuit from your contractor. If you haven't met deadlines, you can expect a lawsuit from that guy. So that's a big problem for me, and it should be a very big concern for you, because I want to make sure, and everybody goes into this with good faith, but if you cannot meet your obligations, I do not want this to affect your personal life. And if you have several businesses, if Patrick over here has a business in Quebec City, in Montreal, in Atlanta, I want to make sure that what he's failing to accomplish in Montreal is not going to affect his $1 million company in Quebec City. So my goal is to make sure that we separate apples and oranges, and that if you cannot fulfill your legal obligations, that you can back out or restructure yourself, and it's not going to affect your personal life and your other businesses. So this is my preoccupation, but there are other there are other reflexes that I want you to have. It's not just legal. The legal liability we've just talked about. So I'm very concerned about that. I'm also I want to tell you that leaving money in the corporation, we are taxed. We are taxed extremely high. Canada, France, all these jurisdictions love to tax. The government makes their money on we go into business with the government immediately. It's our first business partner. So I want to make sure that when we touch $100 of revenue, that any money that we are getting, we're going to be treating it as tax efficiently as possible. So when you have any money left over, meaning if you have any surplus revenue or income, I want to make sure that we're not unnecessarily paying taxes on that money. So why do I say leave money in the corporation? Is because if I leave it in the corporation and don't take it out as a dividend, I'll talk about that in a second, or a salary, I want to make sure that there's more money left over after paying corporate taxes at a lower rate. I want to make sure that we can reinvest it, that we can pay for our warehouse equipment, that we can pay for our marketing that month, our SEO, our coding, whatever it is. So money left in a corporation, there will be more money left in a corporation than will be in your personal bank account, because the government doesn't care. If you touch it personally, you pay taxes on it. I don't like that. Benefit from a lower tax rate. Naturally, corporations, whether you're federal or Quebec, you're going to be paying taxes in Quebec. So it doesn't matter. A federal or a Quebec corporation will be paying the same tax rate. Payout options. When it comes to taking money out, we've all heard of there's no double taxation. So the same applies. But when a corporation takes money and we've left money in the corporation, I want to make sure that when it comes time to pull money out, because you want to go to Cuba with your girlfriend, or you want to buy her a ring, or you need to live, I want to make sure that the money you take out of the corporation, either as a dividend, as a salary, as a repayment of a shareholder loan, whatever the hell it is, I want to make sure that you have options. Because if you're a personal business, there's no options. You've made $100 of revenue, the government has taxed you at 50%, you're already doomed. So I want to make sure that when you touch money personally, you're safe. And tax exemptions when selling. This is very important. If any of you hit the jackpot with anything you're developing today, and I'm sure a lot of you will, and a lot of you have, and I'm looking at people that I know are already at that stage, when you will be selling to your biggest competitor because they find you a threat, you can be exempt from capital gains for up to $800,000 in the event that you sell your assets, your intellectual property. You can be exempt up to $800K if you have a corporate structure. There's no such thing personally. You will not get that tax exemption. So again, this is tax stuff, but this is all stuff I want to implant into your brains because it's very important. So those are the reflexes. That's why we incorporate, and this is why I want you to protect whatever you're doing today from whatever you have at home and for whatever you're going to do at the next event. So that's my preoccupation in talking today. I absolutely want to make sure you have those reflexes.